Hi everyone, let's talk about some brands that aren't worth it. I wanted to expand on some of the unpopular opinions I had in my recent unpopular opinions video. I really just sped through a bunch of things that kind of bother me or things that are definitely very unpopular opinions to have within the beauty community in general. And a lot of people wanted more explanation. A lot of people were kind of unhappy with the things that I said. And I thought that I would just take a couple of those topics and expand upon them. And in this one, I'm going to talk about some brands that aren't worth it, because I started my unpopular opinions video by talking about a brand that I do think is worth it. And a lot of people seem to not really like that. So I just thought, let's expand on brands that aren't worth it. So for me, in that video, I talked about how Natasha Denona was worth the money for me. And one of the things I mentioned was about how people talk about the quality of the products without actually trying it. And it's really true. These are very expensive products. I don't think you have to try everything to know it's not for you, but you can't actually comment on the actual quality of something without having tried it. It makes no sense, and it's incredibly frustrating to me, and that is something that I really stick by. It's still incredibly frustrating. I'll just use this as an example, because this is something that I have seen come up a few times, and a lot of people tend to compare brands like, say, ColourPop to Natasha Denona, and you'll have somebody say, like, hey, I'm wondering if anybody's tried, the Natasha Denona Sunset palette. Can you tell me what you think about it? And then you'll have someone say, oh, it's really not that great. The quality's not that good. I definitely recommend, the ColourPop Yes Please palette. That's a fantastic palette. It's so affordable. It's so much better than the Natasha Denona Sunset palette. Save your money. And then ask that person what they didn't like about the Sunset palette, and it's, I don't know, I don't actually own it. I have the Yes Please palette and I like that so much better. And it's so misleading, because you're giving the impression that you've actually tried this palette and you can actually say, like, this is better than this. That's what really bothers me. And I did say that for some people, it may not be worth it because you actually can't afford it. And I had quite a few people get angry with me over that. But listen, I'm the first person to admit right now, I can't afford Natasha Denona products. I can't afford very expensive luxury products, even if I like them, even if I may pine after them, if I may want them, even if it is one of my favorite brands, it doesn't mean that it's accessible for me. It's not affordable for me right now, but I still love it. And there is a difference. So I'm not trying to insult anybody by saying something like that maybe it's not within your budget, because it's just true. For some people, it's incredibly, incredibly expensive, and it makes sense not to want to spend that kind of money on colored dust. I totally get it. I just don't think it's fair to talk about the quality of a product, but you can say that something is worth it or not worth it from you based on other feelings and other experiences you might have had, depending on what your personal history, your personal story with makeup is. So I'm going to be talking about my opinions and my thoughts on a few brands that I don't find worth it, and actually one sort of general category of a brand, which I'm sure will be in and of itself a very unpopular opinion. But anyway, so I'm going to start with Tom Ford. Tom Ford is a very expensive brand. It's one of the most expensive makeup brands that Sephora carries, and a lot of the individual products are very expensive. Even when you compare certain products, they're more expensive than something like a Natasha Denona. In general, those products are very expensive, and I've never been drawn to Tom Ford. So yes, the money definitely turned me off, because I feel like it's a few pegs up from some of the other sort of luxury designer brands. I definitely went through phases where I was very into Dior makeup, for example, and Dior makeup is significantly cheaper in comparison to Tom Ford prices. And so the prices kept me away, but also just aesthetically, it didn't appeal to me like other brands do. I tend to be drawn to makeup artist-led brands. Natasha Denona, Pat McGrath, Kevin Aucoin, Lisa Eldridge. The celebrity makeup artistry is something that definitely appeals to me, and that is what inspires me. And occasionally a few designer things slip in as well. Now, Tom Ford, fantastic designer. I don't think anybody can argue with that. And if you look at the work that he did with Gucci and with YSL, amazing. Fashion, incredible. The perfume, Black Orchid, is one of my favorite perfumes that I've ever tried, and it's so expensive, but it's so deep, dark, mysterious. I like that angle of it. But I'm not a Tom Ford girl, and I can fully admit that. I don't think I'm the target demographic. Certainly, I don't have the lifestyle and I don't have the budget for it. But just my vision of a Tom Ford woman who would wear or use the Tom Ford cosmetics is very different from my personal aesthetic. I like the Tom Ford aesthetic, and I can see the inspiration there. And you know, it's the modern luxury that's very opulent, and I can see some of the 70s references, and that comes in from the fashion as well. You can see some of that opulent 70s references, and I'm very 70s inspired in my own personal fashion, but I'm more Laurel Canyon hippy dippy sort of 70s as opposed to like Studio 54 Halston kind of 70s. So I appreciate the aesthetic. It's just not something that I personally like, which is why it's easy for me to, you know, look over the Tom Ford stuff. It's just not something that I like personally for myself. I don't like it on me. And I just feel like when I kind of try to be more of like that designer label kind of person, it just feels really fake and it doesn't feel authentic to me because it's just not who I am. I think of a Tom Ford woman as being somebody, for some reason, this is the image that comes to mind. It's like someone with like the perfectly straight hair, okay, my wig, but I'm thinking like the beige kind of turtleneck with like gold earrings, like the gold accessories, and like the $800 jeans, and just like the Starbucks in hand, and you know, the Tom Ford compact. I just think very put together, and I always feel like a kid playing dress up like when I wear a blazer. I mean, I'm not a suit kind of person, although I wish I was. So it's easy for me to say Tom Ford isn't worth it. I have very limited experience actually with the Tom Ford products. I've received a couple of things that were passed on to me from my sister, who's a big Tom Ford fan, and I really loved like the brow gel. I used a few like cream eyeshadow things, which I enjoyed using. They were good products, but I just never really felt that connection to the brand. And I think that probably comes down to, with a lot of these, is about connection. Some of it's experience, some of it's price, but some of it's just that personal connection. I feel like there's some brands we're drawn to whether we know why we are or not. There's certain reasons, certain things that just sort of hook us in more than others, and Tom Ford has always just been one that just bypassed me. In the still sort of higher end category, but not nearly as luxury as Tom Ford, Estee Lauder. This is a brand I've talked about before, and a brand that I'm not really very fond of. Estee Lauder has been around for a very, very long time. It's a very well-established brand. A lot of people love Estee Lauder, and for me, it's just a boring brand that I have zero connection with, that I just don't feel drawn to the products. I don't feel drawn to the packaging. I just don't feel drawn to the Estee Lauder world. I just don't feel like it's interesting enough to hold my attention. I've strayed away from some of the makeup that I've done before, and I have gone more towards a more simple, classic kind of makeup look from time to time, because that's what I've been drawn to, more simplicity. But simplicity doesn't have to equal boring, and for me, Estee Lauder is just one of those boring brands. Like, I think of a brand like MAC, which is pretty simple, but one of my all-time favorites, and something that I am continuously drawn to over and over again, while Estee Lauder is always just one I bypass. I'll mention Clinique as well. So if you've watched some of my other similar videos like this, a lot of the same brands come up time and time again, but Clinique is just another brand that I feel like hasn't really kept up with the times, but not really in a Estee Lauder classic kind of way, because the Estee Lauder consumer is a loyal consumer. They are somebody who's going back time and time again, and they don't really have to update packaging. But I feel like Clinique was like a really popular intro brand to makeup for a lot of people when they were teenagers or in their like early 20s. A lot of people had that sort of first Clinique counter experience, and I feel like it hasn't really updated much to kind of get more people interested. And I feel like they could do more within the makeup world. I think they have had a few good products like the Cheek Pop blushes. I've had some bad experiences with some Clinique foundations, actually Estee Lauder foundation as well, which just didn't work well for my skin type and the way that I like makeup to look on my skin. Clinique's been the same thing. I find that a lot of the foundations were very, very orange. Like, they oxidized quite dramatically on me, and I just, every time I think about it, even though Clinique tends to be on the more affordable side of higher end makeup, it just doesn't seem worth it to me. And when I look at the price, I'm like, okay, well, I could just go up a little bit and get something that's I know is going to work for me, or even go down a little bit and go to the drugstore and go for a brand like Physicians Formula, which I really enjoy using. So Clinique is one of those ones that's just, it's never really worth it for me to spend money on or even spend time on, because I think like some people just think worth as money, but I think worth can also include time. And I don't stop to look at the Clinique products anymore. I'm not searching the website. I'm not looking at things because they lost my attention a long time ago, and I don't really know much about what's going on in the Clinique world anymore. And Bite Beauty is another brand that I would say is not worth it. Now, I just recently discovered that Bite has decided to go completely vegan, which I think is awesome. I think it's really great when brands commit to things like that and they want to make positive changes. However, I know a lot of people are really upset because they have had a well-established brand for a few years with some really well-loved products, with some fantastic formulas that people really liked. However, I don't feel like even those old products were worth it because they turned so quickly, and I always had an issue with the product escaping my lip line. There's something about the natural product in there instead of like synthetic waxes that were just not the best, especially in a deeper color. Like a lighter color would be perfectly fine because you wouldn't really notice that much feathering or transferring, as opposed to a deeper color. And like some of the colors they came out with were absolutely beautiful, but just no longevity at all. And then the actual product itself just turned so quickly. And I know there are expiration dates for a reason, but I just feel like they turned so much faster than other things. And after having that experience time and time again, it just really kept me away from the brand. And just I didn't have the same experiences that other people had. Like I tried the agave lip mask and hated it with a fiery passion, and it seems to be one of those products that really divides people. Like you either completely love it and you're a complete fanatic, or you hate it, and I'm in that I hate it camp. So like the more negative experiences I had, the less I was interested in trying the brand. I know they have their lip labs where you can customize your lipsticks, and that sounds really interesting, and that's something I'd love to do if I ever have the opportunity to do so. But there's also quite a long waiting list for that, because I remember a couple years ago when I was in Toronto, I was thinking about going there, and it was just impossible to do so. So very, very popular at that point. I don't know if it's still popular now. So I don't know how this new revamping of the brand is going to go. A lot of people seem pretty unhappy with the direction, but hopefully they'll turn it around. Bite is a Canadian brand, and I'm all about supporting Canadian brands. So I hope that they're able to turn it around and really come out with some really amazing vegan products that I think could appeal to a lot of people. And I'm hoping. I definitely want to try some of the new formulations at some point on the no-buy, so that won't be happening anytime soon. But at some point, I'd really like to try some of the new things and see what it's like in comparison to the old stuff. Because like I can't talk about the new formulations of things without having tried them. And that does bother me a little bit because I like to have a little bit of experience, a little bit of knowledge. So even just to try like one thing or like a little set of something, just to get an idea of the formula, is something that would appeal to me. But just in general, I find those products that don't last very long not to be worth it. I'm going to talk about a luxury skincare brand because it's a very popular brand that I just don't think is worth it from my own experience, and that's Sunday Riley. I've tried quite a few products at this point, and every single time I've had a terrible reaction. My skin has reacted terribly to those products, and I just don't understand. I just don't understand the hype. They get hyped up so much. People are just raving about the products. Plus, when it came out that employees from Sunday Riley had been writing the fake reviews, that was really suspect to me, and it's made me not really trust the brand. That still lingers in my head, and even reading reviews now, I'm still like, can I really trust people? And then when you watch influencers, when you watch like skincare product reviews, it's really hard to know if the product actually is good. Does the influencer have some sort of deal with the brand? Is there something going on behind the scenes? I'm just such a huge skeptic, and I'm like, can I really trust this? Is this gonna be something worth my time and my money? Because these products aren't cheap, and it's really difficult with skincare, and every now and then I feel like I want to try this. I want to see if this is actually going to work for me and improve my skin. Give me that magical, beautiful, like supermodel skin, please. And I just can't seem to feel like it's worth it. I just can't seem to do it with Sunday Riley just because I've had so many bad experiences. And I will say getting samples helps a lot. It's definitely exposed me to some more expensive brands and products that I probably wouldn't have otherwise, but things that I really enjoy. And I feel like skincare samples seem to be a little easier to come by than makeup samples. but it's just hard to get enough of a sample to know if a product is actually going to work for you long term. But if you have a pretty instant reaction, that's a pretty good sign that it's not the right thing for you. So there are in general a lot of luxury skincare brands that are so incredibly expensive, and it's so difficult to know what to invest in. And I feel like I've definitely made a few mistakes along the way in investing in some expensive skincare that just ended up being a really terrible thing for my skin. But I guess you win some and you lose some. I only have one drugstore brand that I would say isn't worth it for me, and that is Revlon. I know I say worth it a lot in this video, but that's what this video is called, I'm sorry. Revlon is a brand I used to like, kind of. It was a brand that my mother seemed to purchase from a lot, a brand that we seemed to both purchase from for a while when I was a teenager, or like a preteen. And then I very quickly lost interest in Revlon. When it comes to drugstore, I really love Physicians Formula, I really love Maybelline, CoverGirl, Elle, Wet n Wild. There's a lot of really good drugstore brands, and Revlon is just one of those ones that I always look at and I'm like, some of their advertisements seem like they try too hard. I always remember seeing like the really celebrity focused spokespeople in their ads and like all the displays around the drugstores and everything, and it always just seemed like they were trying so hard, and it just didn't appeal to me. I remember seeing ads in magazines when I used to buy those all the time, fashion magazines, and just not really being attracted to the Revlon ads as I would be some of the other brands. And it's held true. There's occasionally a product here or there that I try from Revlon, but when it comes to drugstore, like if I know I need something, like let's say for example I need a new face primer, which I actually do, my plan is to hit the drugstore, and I will be going right for those brands that I have that connection with. You know, I grew up with CoverGirl, and I wanted that easy breezy CoverGirl thing. Like I remember me and my friend having sleepovers, and we were always pretending to be like CoverGirl models, and maybe she's born with it, maybe it's Maybelline. I remember that about a mascara ad that I watched when I was watching some like Cher special on. It was like one of my first memories, or my very first memory, is watching the Cher If I Could Turn Back Time music video. And I also remember a Maybelline mascara commercial. Like it's just ingrained in my brain, and I just have such like positive feelings toward those brands. And then I've had some really good experiences with Physicians Formula, and then I've had some really good experiences with some other brands, and I like their customer service, and I like their presence on social media and their advertisements, and I feel like they're just brands that I feel comfortable supporting. And so there's something lingering there about Revlon. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's just something that I can't get over. I don't know if I have some repressed Revlon memory in my mind somewhere, but I just can't. It's just like the one drugstore brand that I always skip over. I saved the category one for last, I'm sorry, but it's indie brands. I know. Okay, so I'm Canadian. A lot of indie brands are not Canadian, and it can be very expensive to ship these products to me. It can also be very time consuming, not only because some indie brands have a very, very long turnaround time for products. I find that some products get advertised and they're not even fully manufactured yet. They're just selling these things, and then it can take months to get to you. And I lose interest really quickly, and when I order something, like I want to get it soon. I don't want to have to wait 2 months for the product to be made and then another month or two to actually receive the product. The few times I've ordered from indie brands, like the small indie brands, it's taken a long time to get stuff, and it ends up just turning me off just because I don't like waiting, and I don't like the extra cost, and then I just worry about damages and where these products are going. Some of the things I've ordered from indie brands have ended up on trips around different parts of Canada and the US and other countries, and it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. I wish it was easier to get my hands on some of those products. That's why I like when some brands become available at places like Sephora and Ulta. It becomes a lot easier to get your hands on those products, but it's just not always going to be applicable for some indie brands, and I hate how long it takes. There was one brand I ordered from, and I think it was like 4 months before I got the actual thing I had ordered, and by that point I had completely forgotten about it, and I just wasn't excited about it anymore, and it just keeps me from experiencing some of those indie magical things that I see other people rave about. I just feel like some people have an easier experience. They might not have had the same kind of experience that I've had with some of these brands when it comes to shipping, when it comes to the cost. Because not only do you usually have to pay quite a bit for shipping sometimes, then you're looking at the conversion rate from the whatever other currency to Canadian dollars, and then if you get hit with customs fees, which happens pretty often, then it's extra fee on top of extra fee, and it just ends up being something that I feel like is not worth it to me when I've never had experience with those products, and I'm really just going in blind, and then it feels like it's not worth it to just buy one or two things. If you have to spend, you know, $15, $20 on shipping, well, you might as well make the order count, but then you're spending a lot of money on something that you've never actually tried, and sometimes it's a huge bust. Sometimes you have wasted your money and there's no return policy. A lot of these times these smaller brands can't afford it. So it just ends up being something that I think about doing, and I'll look at the website and I'll look at all the things that I would like to try, and I look at the swatches and I'm like, that looks beautiful and I'd love to try it. And I follow a few people who review quite a few indie brands, and which always looks so interesting to me. But then I do have my doubts sometimes, because sometimes like swatches look almost too perfect. Things look almost too good to be true, and sometimes with some of the people who review it, some of the times they are affiliated with the brand, so then it makes my mind do the things where I wonder what's legitimate and what's not, because some of those things just truly seem too good to be true. But like I said, I'm a huge skeptic, and it does keep me away from those indie brands, and despite spending time drooling over some of those beautiful things that I've seen, it ends up being something that I go, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm going to stick with a retailer like Sephora or the drugstore or Beautylish or Ulta, which just, it's easier. And it just kind of sucks, because I wish I would be able to try some of those things sort of pain-free, if you will. But anyway, that is everything for my brands that aren't worth it. Remember, this is just my opinions. I would love to hear from you. I love getting your guys' feedback and hearing your opinions, especially when you disagree with me, because it's really interesting to get a different point of view, and that's why I enjoy making these videos as well, because maybe it's something that you hadn't considered. We all have different opinions, we all have different preferences, and we all have different loves and wants, and it's very fascinating to me. And anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I hope we get a chance to chat soon. Bye for now.